Now, our next guest is one of folk music's greatest icons, back in Ireland, celebrating over 50 years on the road.
He's brought us through the streets of London, not to mention from Clare to here. Ralph McTell, you're very welcome
Ralph.
to the
Great
show.
Great to have you, Ralph. It's thrilled to have you on the show.
Have you seen the old man in the closed down market?
Back in the late 60s and early 70s, there was a boom in folk and acoustic music within the UK. But one of the leading musicians during that revival period was an immensely talented ragtime guitarist called Ralph May, who went by the name of Ralph McTell and had an exceptional talent as a singer-songwriter.
Just now and then.
In 1969, he included on his second album a moving song that would change his life and become a much-loved classic, known to millions around the world.
Let me take you by the hand and lead you through the streets of London. I'll show you.
Ralph had finally got the hit with Streets of London and had become quite well known. He'd done Top of the Pops and so on, and then he did a huge concert tour around that time and had done very well. But by 85, his career was slipping a little bit, and I was doing a lot of work at that time for Telstar Records, the TV record company, doing TV advertised albums. So we had the idea of doing an album for Ralph to try and broaden his market. I figured that Wilson Street would be a good location to do a Streets of London video. And one of our neighbours, a young filmmaker neighbour of mine called Isa Porkasrani, found this clip of the commercial and was intrigued by it. He asked me if I'd be interested in telling the story of how it was made as part of the local history. So this film here is the background to how we made a commercial with Ralph in Wilson Street. And this is Winchmore Hill. Oh, I'll take that again, there's a car.
Okay. Yeah, policy. You can just keep on rolling, it's fine.
Hi, I'm Michael McDonagh, and this is Winchmore Hill in North London. I came to London in 1965 from Manchester as a student to study what is now Middlesex University, but was then the Polytechnic. And on the course I was doing, there was another student who was a guy called Bruce May, who came from Croydon, and his elder brother was a ragtime guitarist called Ralph McTell. So when we were at college, I ended up being the guy who booked all the bands for the college concerts. So we had things like Pink Floyd for 40 quid, and we had John Mayall with Eric Clapton in the band, and I think I paid £55 for them. But at the same time, Bruce ran a folk club in what is now Old Grammarians Rugby Club, but was then our rugby pavilion. And we used to have folk and blues and stuff up there. And so Ralph first started some of his first appearances coming up playing for us there. By 1972, Bruce and I had both graduated, and I was then working for a record company, for Transatlantic Records, and we're looking to buy our first houses without much money. And Bruce found, because he lived in Winchmore Hill, around the corner, found Wilson Street. And in this road there was a little Victorian terrace of houses that not many of them had been done up at all. And he bought one at number 14 for £8,000. And in '73 he told me that somebody had died in another house down the road, and I bought mine for £9,000, or we bought mine for £9,000, which had no bathroom, an outside toilet, and like one electric light socket, and came up here to do it up. I thought Winchmore Hill was miles from anywhere. I lived in Camden Town, and I'd seen World's End on the end of on a bus sign, and I thought that's about right. But we tried to get on the housing ladder, and that was the only way we could do it. So that's how we both ended up in Wilson Street. By 1985, we were producing quite a lot of records for a record label called Telstar that specialised in TV advertised albums, and we would make special albums for that project and then shoot a commercial. I'd left Wilson Street by then. We moved in '79, but I knew the street and thought it would be an ideal location to choose for a sort of Streets of London commercial. And at that stage, because the unions were so strong, I was not allowed to direct. I was only allowed to produce, and had to get a director who had a union card. And so I got my dear friend Thaddeus O'Sullivan from Ireland to come and shoot it for me, because he was just beginning at that stage. Went on to become a sort of award-winning film director, and he's just recently had that film, The Miracle Club, out. But he's shot lots of award-winning projects, and he's also shot things like May Gray for television, and even shot episodes of Call the Midwife.
Get it inside you, boy, and you'll be going up that hill as fast as you come down.
Though this still has many times more wheat germ than ordinary bread.
Around that time, there was a Hovius ad that was all nostalgia and sepia, and we wanted to create the same thing with this film of Ralph. It was kind of homecoming. So we started here with the pub, but of course we cheated and we moved the pub to the beginning of Wilson Street. So it all became one long walking tracking shock. Because we're on a low budget, or maybe just because I was a cheapskate, I tried to save money by using local friends and people we knew as the extras in the shoot. And there was one shot which was where an old lady had to be closing her curtains as Ralph went past and just wave good evening to him. And as it was a long tracking shot, it was quite complicated to get the timing so that he passed at the moment she was drawing the curtains. And I'd used a neighbour who is a retired Salvation Army brigadier called Brigadier Boyden. And the problem was that we had an assistant inside with a walkie-talkie to cue her, but each time she missed the cue, so that Ralph had gone past by the time she got round to doing the action. And it was getting quite frustrating. And at that point, Thaddeus leant close to me, put his face close to mine near the camera, and hissed into my ear a lesson which I, learnt, a very valuable lesson, which he said to me, "Mick, get me actors. I need actors, actors." And whenever I see him now, we joke about that because he was so right. There was another shot, which we actually shot at number 14, which is a little girl in the window. And that was a school friend of my daughter's at the time. I think her name was Rebecca Shears. And then there was some boys running down the street to meet Ralph, and one of those was his son. And we also put a telephone box here, which we rented in for the purpose, to make it look like the telephone box on the green. And that was quite amusing because the commuters going to work the next day, some of them actually tried to use the telephone box before the props company had come to collect it. Anyway, it was quite a big issue that night, and a big thing. A lot of people came out to watch the filming. So that it was a night shoot, so involved in clearing all the cars from the street, which was sort of manageable because I still knew nearly all the neighbours, and they all really were good and cooperated, and we moved all the cars into the builder's yard at the end of the street. They gave us permission. And we got all the cars moved except there was one Audi still parked here, and it was in the way, and the police couldn't move it, and it transpired that it belonged to the international tennis player Jo Jury. Lived in the street, and she was playing in Flushing Meadow, But we managed to track her down on the day, and I got her number and called her, and she didn't know who I was, but I said, excuse me, we need to move your car. So she told us that the cleaner would give us access to get the keys from in the house. So he did manage to move her car. Anyway, the whole project was done. It was a fairly big deal. But in the end, the project was a bit of a disaster because Bruce May, Ralph's brother, had changed the title from Homeward Bound and made it to at the end of the perfect day, and there was another album out at the same time with that. And also we lost the still photography didn't really work out, and so they did this sort of illustration which wasn't as good, with smokestack chimneys painted in behind the Wilson Street on the cover. And finally Ralph was never that happy with the album, I think because they'd tried to save money, and the record company weren't that happy because they'd not used real strings and used synthetic strings. But so the whole thing didn't really work. But it was an interesting experience.
Let me take you
Ralph McTell is loved for his gentle songs of English life.
of London.
Now, for the first time, he has recorded a special album of classic songs,
I peeped in
of friendship,
to say good night,
of tenderness.
and I heard my child in prayer for you.
And Homecoming, an album to treasure at the end of a perfect day.